All right, well, I wanted to show that video this morning, kind of get you a little background of what's going on. It's a big story, even though it's just one page in the Bible. So this would be a great movie. Anyone love movies? Anybody here? Anybody? Okay. Anyone not like movies? Anyone seen the Barbie movie? Barbie or Oppenheimer? Okay, 3 people, good. Okay, yeah. Here's what I want to do though this morning, because as we're thinking about this idea of this amazing story, and this is such an amazing story, I want you to tell me, like literally share with me today, and plus this will help me with my Netflix and Hulu choices. What is literally like your favorite movie of all time? What is it? You got it right now? What is it? Just someone say it. Wait, what? Wedding Singer? Really, Amy? I love that. I do. I like you more now than I ever have for that moment. Who else? What do we got? Forrest Gump. Yep, classic. Good job, Tina. Like that. What else? I heard one more. Titanic. My wife watches Titanic literally, Tim, once a week. Man. Now it's turning into a hootenanny. I like this, right? You listen to me. What was it? Last one. You know what? He said Napoleon Dynamite. I watched that the first time. I was like, I don't get this. I don't think it's good. Went back and watched it the second time. One of my favorite movies. That Nacho Libre. Good call. So that's all good. Those are good. But I want to share with you truly the best list that I made up. Schindler's List. Anyone ever seen it? Painful, right? Hard to watch, but unbelievable. I don't know if anyone's ever seen Remember the Titans. You got to admit, though, great movie, right? Based on a true story. I've never seen The Notebook, but I've heard it 14 times. Every time we drive to the beach, literally, my wife will get in the back seat. My daughter, they all stay back there and watch it. One of our cars has, the DVD thing. So I've heard it 4 times. It's really a good story. The reason I say that to you, because ultimately, top 4 of all time, though, we all know, right? Rocky 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? Yeah, you got to go with those. So, with that being said, here's the thing, though. In all honesty, whatever you said, whatever you're thinking, whatever you didn't say, if you have a favorite, I do know why it's your favorite, though. Because it has a great story. It has a great story. We all are suckers for a great story. Well, today, I want to talk through this one book, Philemon, just literally, I think it's 25 verses, 1 page in the Bible. I want to tell you an amazing story, and I want to give you 3 questions, okay, real simple, 3 questions to I think, improve your life, but to tell a better story with your life. That's going to be my goal as we kind of walk through this, and as you see the story, just to give the recap, I know we watched the video, but in case you zoned out and didn't pay attention, Paul writes a letter to this guy who basically was probably leading one of the house churches, and he's like, hey, I'm in prison, and I met this guy, and he's now put his faith in Christ. And this guy, actually, we get to talking, come find, he ran away. He used to be a slave for you. And as they said in the very end of the bin, this is the stickiest part of all. In this culture, right, Paul's about ready to ask him not to forgive him and bring him back and let him be your slave, because under law, he had every right to punish him, kill him. So it's like, that's a big ask. But Paul says, no, I'm going to go deeper. I'm going to ask you to bring him back, not as a slave, but as a brother in Christ. Literally to serve together. Now, all of us in this room maybe get the deepness and how crazy and how bold of a thought this is. But today, as we kind of go through this amazing, amazing story, we're going to see that Paul challenges. I'm just going to call him Phil because it's hard for me to pronounce his name, and I keep saying it wrong half the time, and none of us really know how it's said. But Paul's going to ask him, literally, to write a better story with his life. So what are these 3 questions? We're going to kind of go through this and then kind of try to unpack it. But I want to give you 3 questions that I truly believe, if you'll be honest, that's the beauty too. You got to be honest with yourself. And I don't know about you guys, but I've learned in my life, I'm really good at lying to myself. Now, you guys are like, oh, I don't do that, but you do, right? Have you ever bought something you wish you never bought? Anybody? Yeah? You know why? Because you talked yourself into it. Here's why it's hard, and this is why you're so good and I'm so good at talking myself into things. Because the voice in my head that's usually telling me something that deep down I'm not fully sure about this, that voice sounds a whole lot like my voice. right? Have you ever been mad at someone and someone's like, hey, man, you probably just need to let it go. But then I've got a voice that sounds just like my voice in my head saying, you don't let that go, right? You got to make them pay. They embarrassed you. They took advantage of you. Whatever the case might be. So if we're honest with ourselves, these questions, I'm telling you, I truly believe life-changing. So the first is this, the legacy question. What's the legacy question? What story do I want to tell? When this is all said and done, you know, I'm 44. I don't know how much longer I'm going to live. I would love to live to be 100 plus. Okay, but even if I live to be 100 plus, that's still only 56 years. I'm clearly that halfway point or less, more than likely. So at the end of my life, they're going to put me in a box, and some of you, hopefully all of you, show up. I can tell right now, none of you are coming. Okay, but when it's my wife and my kids there, my son's here, he'll show up, hopefully. But they're going to talk about my legacy. What story did I tell with my life? And here's the thing you got to understand. And I try to remind, I was reading a book a few years back. I don't remember the title of the book, but I remember one chapter, and this hit me. He said, I want you to picture that you wake up in the morning. As soon as you wake up, you roll over a bed, and you look, and there's a guy, a weird guy, literally with a notepad staring at you, writing. He said, that'll freak you out. But as you get over, you're like, dude, why are you in my bedroom? What's going on? And he's like, I'm here to journal and just literally collect and record every single thing you do today for 24 hours. Because I'm going to write an autobiography of your life, and the story I'm going to tell about you is going to be all about this one day. And the beauty of this, author said, how would you live that day? Guarantee you this, when you're about ready to lose it on your spouse, getting ready to yell at your kid, you like, look over and he's at you like, you know what, we can work this out. Right? Think about that. And his whole point was, he was like, that's what we don't get is every day I'm writing a new chapter of the story of my life. And so are you, all of us in here. So what story do we really want to tell? Every decision, every moment, a new page. So what story do I want to tell with my life? What story do you want to tell with yours? In verse 8, like I said, it's only one chapter. This is Paul writing. So you got Paul, you got Phil, and you got the big O. Okay, the big O was the former slave or current slave who probably is nervous because he did something to kind of, wrong to Phil. So you got Phil. So Paul's writing to Phil, and this is what he says in verse 8. He says, that is why I'm boldly asking a favor of you. I could demand it. You remember how you were living? You remember your life before Christ? And you remember when I reached out to you? Remember all the things I've done for you, the way that I've lived, the example I've shown for you? He said, I could demand it in the name of Christ because it's the right thing for you to do. When I'm writing my story and you're writing your story, sometimes it helps if someone comes along and say, hey, I just want to remind you, what's the right thing to do? What's the story you want told about your life? You see, Paul's trying to let him see, one day this is just going to be a story. He probably had no clue that thousands of years later we're going to be talking about a story. But he's like, I need you to remember the story you tell is important. He says, but because of our love, I prefer simply to ask you, consider this a request from me, Paul, an old man and now also a prisoner. I'm in prison for my faith. Now think about that. Paul does something to me that's a little bit kind of, I don't know, like a jerk move. I love it. But he's like, hey, I know you're probably going to have a little kickback. Like, no, I can't. It's the law. And he doesn't have to come back. Da, 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 da. And he's like, but let me remind you where I'm at too. I'm in prison. Why? Because I did something wrong? No, because of my faith. That's the price I'm willing to pay. Now I'm going to ask you to do a favor for me, and I'm going to guarantee you're not in prison, right? Life's pretty good for you. So what's he trying to get? He's like, hey, I want you to tell a better story. Last weekend, we left Thursday night. It was like kind of our last final hurrah. My son's here this morning. This week, next week, if you see my wife here next Sunday, and she's literally mascara's running, and she's bawling and crying, it's because this Friday, we're going to drop our son off for college and leave. So this is his last Sunday here. I said that shameless plug. You can high-five him when he leaves. But we went to Cedar Point and Lake Erie. It was kind of this last kind of final family vacation, right, for the summer. So we go. So we're Friday, we're going to be at Cedar Point all day, and we're having a good time. And both my kids are there. They're there with their boyfriends, girlfriends. Everybody's having a good time. Well, we're getting ready to get on a ride, and it's like you can't have phones on the ride. So I look at all of them and say, give me all your phones. Why? because I don't lose phones. So they're all like, there's no way you're going to ride this ride with 8 phones in each pocket. I'm like, I've been riding rides, roller coasters my whole life. You know how many phones I've lost? I looked right at my son and I said, 0. You know why? Because I'm not a moron. I literally put them in my pocket. I push them as far down as I can. Then I put the bar, strap, everything over, and I push it to where it is physics cannot let these phones come out of my pocket. Like, okay, maybe. I'm like, just trust me, okay? Well, we get to the ride. Turns out you couldn't have phones as the big one, so you have to dump them off somewhere and put them in safes, whatever. Doesn't matter. That's not part of the story. But here's what happened. So we do that. What about 5 o'clock, we go on a roller coaster. One of the tinier ones. It's not even a big one. We get on there. We get off the roller coaster. I look at my wife. I'm like, that was fun. We're riding together. And as I get out, I do this. And I realize I don't have my phone on me. So this ride, because they're going fast, 15 seconds, they're in and out. So I go back, and there's 2 girls, sadly, 2 like high school girls, just ready to go. You have my phone? They're like, no, we don't. And they just take off, right? I'm like, I lost my phone. So we start tracking it, and sure enough, it's over in the water park somewhere. So on some hill, it just fell down. And the reason I'm telling you that is, and I know you guys can mock me, all of you can mock me. You can fist fight me today when we leave. You can call me every name in the book. I'm not going to say I love any of this. It won't. But at the end of the day, I'll get over it. But if I lose something, my wife will tell you, I lose my mind. It's the one thing I can't handle. I can't handle it at the house when I can't find something. Like that's probably my kryptonite of all kryptonites. I'm freaking. So I'm like, no, I don't have my phone. It has my license, literally my credit cards. We're supposed to get on a boat the next day. I'm supposed to be the captain of. I'm going to need my credit cards, my license. So all this stuff starts going right, and I'm kind of freaking out. So I'm just like, what do I do? And I remember we're walking back because we're going to go back to the room. We don't know if we can get in our room. I don't have my phone. That was our pass. So as we're walking back, I walk ahead of all of them. And this is true. I'm walking ahead of all of them, and I'm just like trying to just calm down. So I'm trying to think, okay, are we going to be able to get in our room? Are we going to be able to do? I'm going through the list. And I promise you guys, just so you know this, in the middle of walking, and I also walked away because I thought if one of these knuckleheads tries to talk to me, I'm going to slap them, right? And as I'm walking away, I promise you guys, promise, I'm not making this up. I make up a lot of stuff. This is actually true. I remember I said, what story do I want to tell? I said that to myself. I really did. I was like, how do I want this to be known at this point? Do I want all of them to be like, yeah, well, it was room for Dad. See, boyfriends and girlfriends were like, I knew Trent was ruined the rest of the day. It was miserable. He couldn't focus. He was all worked up. He was all bent out of shape. And I thought, what story do I want to tell? And I made a decision. I was walking ahead of him. I was like, I want to tell a better story today. Because at this point, what's done is done. Right? I want to tell a better story. This question will guide you to living a legacy, really, that's worth leaving. What story do I want to tell? And kind of the big idea of this whole thing, I want you to get this, okay? Decide your tell before life tells it. Decide the tell of your life before life tells it. And this is what Paul's saying. He's like, hey, I could demand it. I could force you, but I'm not. Because Phil, I want you to think about for just a second, what story? When this is all said and done, I know in the moment it feels big. I know in the moment it feels like it's the end of the world. But a year from now, a month from now, 10 years from now, it's just going to be a story. Do you want it to be a good story or a bad story? What story do you want to tell? That's the legacy question. Second one is the life question. This question is really important too, and this is going to maybe kind of get some of you squirming if you're honest, and myself as well, because we do it. The life question just says, what role am I trying to play? You see, in every movie that's good, and I read a book on this, it was so fascinating. If you ever read like Joseph Campbell's The Hero Journey, it's old, but it's really good. It's basically the Rocky movie, all movies, Star Wars. He kind of originated this idea. But basically the concept is you have a hero. And a hero usually needs a guide or a mentor, someone to come along and kind of help them transform from what they are to what really they were meant to be from the beginning. All great movies have this. But then you also always have to have a villain. And a villain is someone who wants to make the hero pay. He's been hurt, something bad's happened. So his whole thing is about revenge and paying back what's been wrong to him. Then you always have victims. And victims are the people who are really kind of minor in the story, but they're needed because they have to be rescued by the hero. Now, why did I tell you all that? I know some of you completely got lost, but here's why. Anything that happens in your life, you're going to get to choose. Do I want to kind of grow in this moment? Do I want to realize, as uncomfortable as I am, that God may be using this? Maybe I can be your guide this morning to give you some encouragement and say, maybe this really, and I know it really, really stinks and I hate it for you. I really do. But is it possible that God actually is going to transform you in ways he never could without this happening? See, that's what a hero does. But you know what a villain does? They get mad and they make sure everybody else pays. They make people pay like they're kids who didn't even do anything wrong. But you know what a victim does? A victim just says, well, I can't do anything. Just going to need someone to save me again. Rescue me. See, what role do we want to play? Look what Paul says in verse 12. He says, I'm sending him back to you. And I love this. This is so good. And with him comes my own heart. We're one now. And I'm going to send him back to you. And this is kind of an open-ended, I'm going to be in prison. I don't know what you're going to do with him. But let me give you a story of the role you get to play. I want to keep him here with me while I'm in these chains for preaching the good news. And he would have helped me on your behalf. But again, I didn't want to do anything without your consent. I wanted you to help because you're willing to, not because you're forced. I don't want you to be the villain where you're constantly angry because you've been wronged and somebody's got to pay for it. I don't want you to throw your hands up and be like, well, I can't. Paul, it's the law. I got to follow the law. It's like, no. I want you to make a choice to use this really tough moment to transform yourself. That is the role. You'll never get where you want to be. Do you know this? You'll never get where you want to be till you're fully honest about where you really are. And I mean that, myself included. And as long as if I never can catch myself playing as a victim or a villain, someone wrongs you, what do? What do? It's like, well, make them pay. Right, because I'm going to be a villain now. No one likes the villain in the story. Well, you know, Trent, there's just nothing. And let's be honest, sometimes there isn't. Let's talk about like child abuse. That's victim. And that's horrible. And I'm not making light of that. That's just so horrible. There's nothing that person can do about that. But here's where I think the danger comes. Now you got to make a decision when you become 30 and 40. Am I going to stay in this mentality of just like, I can't do anything, I'm just stuck? Or am I going to make other people pay? Or am I going to say, God, I hate it, and I know it breaks your heart and you hate it, but transform this. The gospel has the power to do that. Now, but before we get to this kind of concept, I want to share with you. So let's go back. So I lose my phone. I actually sneak in the water park, don't have a ticket, give them some story, don't tell anybody, maybe a stretch of a lie, right? Get in there. I get inside, and I'm like, I can track it on my wife's phone. I'm like, okay, it's here somewhere, and it's moving a little bit. So there's a bunch of bushes. I'm like, I fall in the bushes. So I look in the bushes, it's not there. Well, I go over to this other area where there's all caged in from the roller coaster, and I look, there's 28, I'm not making this up, there's 28 phones in there. So I'm looking around, calling mine. None of them look like mine, okay. And I'm like, it's still kind of over here. So I walk over, and there's a restricted area, completely fenced in. It looked like they're literally, I don't know, it must be like monsters or something. There's like big signs, beware, don't come in. And my wife's like, well, it's probably in there, but you can't go in there. Says who, right? And about that time, this dude was awesome, probably 18, high school. He hates his job. He's not happy with anything. He comes walking out, and it's like, make sure you lock the door behind you. Big sign. Well, what's this kid do? He's 18, right? He walks out, smoking and joking, and leaves. Well, as soon as he opens, that door swings open. I just walk right in. And I hear my wife as I'm walking in, don't do it. I get back out, and she was like, I was freaking out back there. I was like trying to think, what am I going to do when you come back out or what? I was like, what do you think is going to happen to me? I'm going to go to prison? You think there's like a prison here? But here's what I said. So we kind of think we knew it was, I go back, like you just have to wait till the park closes. Go back to the ride. They'll sweep the place. They'll bring it back. Okay. We're sitting there. It's 11 p.m. Family's all back. I'm sure they're having a good time. My wife and I are sitting there waiting on the phone. We're in line with about 20 people. Guys, I kid you not. I kid you not. I'm just sitting there. First, I'm a little ticked, but then I started really enjoying this. Literally, I don't know where these mutants come from, these people, but it's the most craziest conversation I've ever heard. This girl comes back. She's maybe 20-some, worker. She's like, guys, it's going to be about midnight before they finally come back through, just letting you know. Guy raises his hand, mid-20s. If we actually lost our phone, will you replace a new one for us? And I like this girl because she was so sassy. She said, I don't make enough to replace my own phone. Fool? Like she really was. And he was like, I think. She's like, no, we're not replacing your phone. Oh, well. You know what I thought? Victim, right? You got to help me. Somebody else's, it's your fault, somebody's fault. And I wanted to look at the guy and be nice, you're not rude, but like, dude, it's our fault. They're not responsible for our phone. But here's the best part. I'm not. My wife would be at second service. Just ask. No, I won't talk to her. Just walk up and say, "What's the conversation in line?" Another guy was getting a group about mid-20s, about 5 or 6 other people together. They're about ready to start a lynch mob. And here's what they were saying. I'm not making this up. We can sue them. If we all get together, we will put a lawsuit against this place. You know what it is? Villain. I'm mad, something's happened to me, you're going to pay for it. Now think about that for a second. That's how this whole thing works. Now, I want to read a verse in Galatians before we come back real quick, because I think this is so good. Paul said this in Galatians 5. He said, you, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Now, I don't know if you're anything like me, but as a teenager, I became a Christian, started reading the Bible. I would read flesh. What do we think of when we think of flesh? Flesh and bone, right? Like, okay, meat, that. When I was about 18 or 19, I read a book, changed my life forever. Haven't read it since. It's such a great book. But the book's called Grace Walk. And this guy said this about flesh, and Steve McVeigh. He said this. He said, we have all learned to rely on our own strategies for getting our needs met. The Bible calls this mechanism for servicing our own needs the flesh. Every person has developed his flesh life in order to get what he wants out of life as much of the time as possible. Don't think of flesh as skin, but as personal techniques for meeting your own perceived needs. Now, that makes that verse a lot more powerful to me, because what he's saying is he's like, hey, all of us have these systems. You grow up with them. If you grew up with brothers, right? All of you have brothers. You know how it works. You're getting ready to eat, and you know as soon as your mom sets down food, what do? You've got 8 seconds to eat as much as you can, right? Because everybody eats fast. Everybody's just mauling the food. I watched my wife eat. She had all sisters. Hey, Katie, care if I have a little piece of your bread? Sure, Jonda, why not? We all share around here, right? You're like, what? They're taking their time. They're enjoying the meal. They're laughing. They're talking. We're just like, all right, see you later, right? And you leave. But I tell you that because it's really, we have certain things that we develop growing up. Some of you had a really awful life growing up. You did. If I brought you on stage right now and had you tell your story, all of us would be in tears. It's that bad. Heartbreaking. But here's the danger, because your life's been so tough, you've developed systems, behavior systems, motive systems to get what you need to survive. Nothing wrong with that. But Paul's like, all of us are going to resort back to this flesh concept of like, I got to make somebody pay. Or I've got to throw my hands up and just give up and freak out, or wall somebody off and refuse to talk to them, right? This is all the flesh. Look what he says in this verse, to go back to it. He says, you, my brothers and sisters, family. Now we say, hey, our kind of code here is we're a family of servants on mission. Notice how even in this verse he brings it out. My brothers and sisters, we're family. So Phil probably even read this letter or heard this letter at other times. He said, we're called to be free. That's the good news. You're not under the law. You're not under the rules. You're free in Christ. He says, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather serve. Why? Because we're designed to be servants. Serve one another humbly in love. For the entire law is fulfilled and keep this one command. What's the entire law? This new, remember we talked about the new command, the new law? Jesus said, here, this thing's going to trump it all. Love others as I have loved you. Look what he says. He says, love your neighbor as yourself. Compassion creates stories worth retelling. And we got to be careful, because I think the reason I added that in, because we're going to be tempted to live in the flesh, live in our old systems. Okay, so we said legacy question. What story do I want to tell? We said there's the life question, right? What role am I trying to play? And this is the most important one. This is the best one. The love question. If you'll learn to ask yourself this question quietly in your mind, I'm telling you, it's a game changer. Because I think everything Jesus taught is summed up with this one simple question. What does love require of me? Let me tell you my story just so you know how bad. Think about Phil here. He's like, but let me tell you about Big O for a second, okay? Big O actually stole everything. He stole everything from my kids. My kids, he literally came in before he ran away, took everything in our house, took all my kids' toys. Ugh, can't do that to a kid, right? And here's what Paul's going to ask. He's going to say, but what does love require of me and you? Look at verse 20. He says, yes, my brother, please do me this favor for the Lord's sake. Give me this encouragement in Christ. I am confident, this is underlined in my Bible, as I write this letter to you, that you will do what I ask, which was a big ask, okay? It really was. I gotta be careful as I say that. Really stress the K there. This was a really big ask that he was making right for this guy. But here's the best part. He says, I'm confident you'll do this and more. Not because you're under the law, not because I'm mandating you. I'm telling you this. Why? Simply because this is what love is required of us. That's what love requires. Love lived loudly leaves a legacy. Paul wants him to see this. Love lived loudly. I'm telling you, will tell a story that you'll be proud of one day. Love lived loudly. That's the secret to this. What was the new command? We said it 2 weeks ago, remember? Jesus said, I'm asking you to love one another as I have loved you. Love each other the way that I have loved you. I wrote this down. Treat others as Jesus treated you. Treat others the way Jesus has treated you. How does Jesus treat you? Have you ever made a mistake? Have you ever said you were going to do something, even promised it to God, and came back on it? Anybody? Yeah. Have you ever sinned? Have you ever done something you completely did not want to do? Well, guess what? What did Jesus do? He forgave you. He loved you. That's exactly what he's calling us to do with others. That's the new command. Decide your tale before life tells it. So, as we close and pray, I want to share a personal story with you guys. And I'm not going to tell the names, and no one knows what's going on, but there's a C3er, and having a couple having some family issues, and it's heavy, and it's tough, and being in communication with them, and again, just tough situation. But I was talking to the guy, and he's telling me the story just this past week. And if I could repeat that story, and I won't, but if I could tell you that, it's such a heartbreaking story because it involves your kids. And all of you guys know in here, at the end of the day, I said losing something would really send me off the rails. Honestly, more than anything would be my kids. If you told me like my son's miserable, my daughter's struggling, it's like, oh, that's what gets us, right? So as he's telling the story, I tried real hard instead of getting in advice mode. I just wanted to listen and kind of just really like show some empathy because I struggle with that. So I'm just listening to it and I'm trying to think if that was my kids and my story and how heartbreaking it was. And because I had prepared this, I did drop a bomb on him. I'm not going to lie to you guys. But as he was telling this, the whole time I kept thinking, you have every right to do exactly what you want to do. You do. You have every right. And I would never judge if they do, because you do. And I think that's what Paul's kind of saying to this guy. It's like, you've got every right. I'm not going to deny that. You have every right for the law in Roman government to bring him back, and you punish him, you beat him, you kill him. I'm just saying that's what the law demands. But I'm going to ask you a question. Instead of asking what the law demands, what if we ask, what does love require of me and of you? That's the question. And I simply told him, I said, just because I've been thinking about this book for the last couple of weeks, I said, I'm going to ask you, what story do you want to tell when it's all said and done? And what does love really require of you? And I'm telling you, if you do that, it's a game changer. It's a game changer. Is it easy? No. Is there times you're like, God, I can't do this on my own? And God's like, exactly, you can't. None of us can. That's why we need Him living through us. That's why we need the Spirit, because I'm not that person and you're not. But we're a new creation now. That's our new desire. It's to love as we have been loved. So I'm going to challenge you as we pray. What if these 100+ several hundred, whatever, I don't know the number, left today, this service, and the next one, and simply said, this week, I want to tell a better story. This week, instead of asking what my rights are or what I get to do or what I should do, what if I simply ask, what does love require of me? As I've been loved by you, I want to return that same love to those around me. Let me give you something that's crazy. What if we did that? And this body of believers beside us, 100, 200 feet away, did that? What if Terry and his group at Tri-State Worship did that? What if First United Methodist of South Point did that? What if, now think about this for a second. Think about collectively an army saying, we have differences, we disagree on some stuff. Okay. But we know at the end of the day, we've been given this new command, love others as you have been loved. Imagine the story we would tell. Imagine what this area looks like. So I'm going to challenge you to do the same as we leave today, as we send you on mission to love others as you've been loved. And I believe just like 2,000 years ago, it'll change the world. So if you would just pray with me for a second. Father, we thank you so much for being so good to us. I thank you for this group of people here. So thankful for them, thankful for the generosity, thankful for just so many of these people in this room that I would call dear, dear friends. But as we walk out these doors today, remind us, God, that we're all going to tell a story. We're telling a story every single day. So help us to write the tale that we want told. Help us to tell a story that we're all going to be proud of one day before it's said and done. How do we do that? By simply thinking of this one key question. What does love require of me? What does loving others the way that you have loved me require of me? Help us to be that group of people. Help us to take those steps. Help us to show love, to be love, and to where maybe someone this week in this room, outside of this room, that's just broken and hurting would get to feel your love through us. Help us to be those people. Jesus, we thank you because you are truly amazing. We thank you that we even can be empowered to love the way you love as you work through us, as you give us new life. So today, before we close, people in this room, people watching online, Jesus, maybe today is the day that someone is ready to turn back to you, to take that step, to find new life. And it's as simple as maybe saying a prayer, something like this: Jesus, I know I'm messed up, and I know I've messed up, but I'm asking you today to save me. So here's your prayer. Jesus, I know you love me. I'm asking you to save me. Forgive me. That's you. Nobody looking around, watching online, still take this exact same step. If you made that decision today, I want to do something really bold. I'm not going to make you come forward, stand up, look at me, but we do want to celebrate. If that's you this morning and you took that amazing step, I want you to do something, if you could, it's incredibly bold. Just do it one time for me, please. If you would just lift your hand and say, Trent, today's the day. I literally asked Christ to forgive me, save me. He promises you're a new creation. That's you. Just put your hand, just hold it up for just a second. We'll say, awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Awesome, awesome. Jesus, we celebrate how good you are. So thankful for you. God, as we leave today, help us to love others as you have loved us. We ask these things in your name, and amen. Guys, don't miss next week. Recalculate week 1. I promise you don't want to miss it.